Okay, we're now going to take our summary of the 6 seals that we find in Revelation chapter 6, and we're going to consider this. The 6 seals are in Revelation chapter 6. The 7th seal is in Revelation 8, but there's a chapter in between which offers us an explanation of chapter 6. Now, many people make the mistake of assuming that chapter 7 happens after chapter 6. It doesn't. It's an explanation so that we make sure that we understand what has happened during the 6 seals. Okay, so we need to look at this. This is chapter 7, and we need to look at this and see how it's an explanation of the 6 seals. First of all, we've got 4 angels. These are not new 4 angels. This is not another bunch. This is the same old ones that we've seen before. These are our friends from the first passage. And we need to understand that, because otherwise we're going to get a bit confused. Here there's a proper explanation of what's going on. We know that they're the agents of wrath, sword, famine and plague, but we see here that they are told not to harm those who are sealed by God on their foreheads. Now, Corinthians tells us that we're sealed, but here in particular it's talking about the people of Israel. There are these people, 144,000 from Israel, and they're on earth. Okay, so they're believers and they're here on earth. Now, they've not been sealed just because they're Jewish. Okay, these are believers because they're servants of God. Okay, they are believers, and so therefore they're set aside. They're here on earth during the outpouring of the 4 horsemen, and in particular they are protected. Now, I want to stress this point because it's very important to understand. You can see illustrations in the Old Testament like Exodus 12 where God pours out his wrath where there are believers, but it passes over. Exodus 12 talks about the plagues of Egypt. God did not take the people of Israel out of Egypt before he poured out his wrath. They were still there. They remained there. But the difference is that those who were covered by the blood, the plague passed over and no destructive plague would touch them. Okay, because they belong to God. When God pours out his wrath, unbelievers are the ones who suffer, but not believers. All right, and I want to stress that point. Okay, they are from Israel, and this is one of the, just as a side note, this is a bit off topic, but this really shows that replacement theology is way off, because God clearly has a plan for a remnant of Israel, for a remnant of those people, because because they're believers. Now, they're not chosen just because they're Israelites, they're chosen because they're believers. All right, and therefore he has got a special plan for them and a particular role for them to fulfill. It doesn't say that they're evangelists. Okay, they're servants of God, so I'm sure that they do spread the gospel, but it doesn't say that they are this wonderful bunch of evangelists who are going to cause this great revival in the end times. In fact, the Bible goes on, as we read on, that men refuse to repent. There will be people saved during the apocalypse. In fact, I know that because in chapter 19 it says that the last person has got saved, but that's down to my interpretation. I will show you that when we get to chapter 19. But here we see that there are 144,000 from Israel on earth, but they are protected from the wrath of God. They will not be harmed because they are sealed. Just as Corinthians says that we are sealed because we're believers. Okay, and then in contrast, there's a group here who are from every nation, tribe, people and tongue. So they're not from Israel, they're Gentiles. And it says that they stand before the throne and before the Lamb. So as I understand it, they're in heaven. Now straight away, people say, you see, it's the Gentile church. First of all, when did the church suddenly take on a Gentile identity? When you talk about the disciples, were they not part of the church? Yes. Were they Gentiles? No, they're Jewish. What makes you part of the church, part of the God's assembly, is that you're a believer, whether you're Jewish or Gentile or any race. Okay, so that's not the distinction. Okay. Also, the next thing that people do is they leap to this. They say, you see, they're Christians, they're in heaven, so they must have been raptured. Really? How about this? Perhaps they've died. You see, 99% of people get to heaven by dying as believers. Okay, they don't necessarily have to get there by being raptured. That's a real leap. Does it say there that they've been raptured? No, it does not. It doesn't even imply that. It doesn't even imply that. Because, of course, remember that this is an explanation of the seals from chapter 6. And we see here, actually, when he asks the question, who are these? He says, sir, you know. How does he know? I'll tell you how he knows, because he was there when Jesus delivered the Olivet Discourse, and he spoke about the Great Tribulation. Because he says here, these are they who come out of the Great Tribulation. They've come out of great persecution. In other words, they're martyrs. They're the martyrs that we see under the altar in the fifth seal. Now this is very important to understand. Unravel this. Unravel this. Just read it for what it says. It doesn't say that they've been raptured. In fact, here it associates it with the elders. It talks about the elders, and people say, oh, well, the elders, they must have been raptured because, well, the 12 apostles were told, the disciples were told, you'll be on the thrones and you'll judge. So, may not these be the elders? Tell me something, were the disciples raptured? No, they all died as martyrs. They're in heaven now, aren't they? Saints are in heaven now. All those who have died in Christ. They're up there, including the apostles. And so therefore we don't have to assume that because there are saints in heaven that they've been raptured. They've died. And it says here that they've come out of great tribulation. They're martyrs. All right? And this is vitally important to understand. Look at the grammar of this. Okay, first of all, it says that they've come out of. Okay, now this is the New King James. The King James, unfortunately, said they came out. Now, came out would be past tense. I have to say, even though I'm a fan of the King James, I love the King James, actually there they got it wrong. Because it is not in the past tense. In the Greek, it's not in the past tense. It should not be translated as who came out. The King James the New King James has put who come out, but even that's wrong because that's the present simple. Actually, the Greek says are coming out of. Are coming denotes something that is an ongoing process. It's something that is happening as we speak. It started in the past, it's still ongoing, it hasn't finished yet, it'll finish in the future. They are coming out of. What does this denote? It denotes people who are being killed on a daily basis. It denotes a daily death toll. These are saints who are dying for their faith, they're martyrs. And as it said under the fifth seal, wait until the rest of your brethren are added who must be killed in the same way. You know, there's this sense in which there are more to come. You know, right now we're going through this pandemic with this COVID-19, and every day you turn on your TV and they say today 781 people have died. Yesterday it was 831. The death toll is now at 10,000 or whatever. And there's a daily death toll. The death toll is not over. By the time we get to the end of it, it could be 20,000, 30,000, 40,000. The death toll might go up to 1,000 a day, 1,500 a day. It's an ongoing thing. Do you get the picture? They are coming out of the Great Tribulation. They were not all just taken out in one go. It's an ongoing process. Because why? It's talking about martyrdom. It's not talking about a rapture where they'd all be taken out at once. Rapture hasn't even been mentioned at all in the book of Revelation. Okay, so therefore here it's talking about people who are dying. Also, not to be too picky about prepositions and things, it says they are coming out of the Great Tribulation. How can they come out of something which they were never in? If your doctrine, if your teaching is that people are raptured before the apocalypse even starts, before the first seal, then they have never been in the Great Tribulation. And so therefore they cannot come out of it. I can't come out of a room that I've not been in. Right? It's not that they've been kept out of it, it's that they are coming out of it. Okay? And we need to understand that. We need to understand that this is not talking about wrath, it's talking about tribulation. We need to understand exactly what it's saying. It's explaining what chapter 6 said about the fifth seal and the martyrs under the altar. Okay? Make that very clear. But this final comment here is a big reminder to us. Whilst we're arguing over the timeline and we're looking for those time checks, we need to remember what the book of Revelation was written for. It was written as a manual for martyrs. It was written to encourage people in persecution. It was encouraging people to stay faithful unto death, because eventually Jesus would shepherd them and lead them to living fountains of waters, and God would wipe away every tear from their eyes. You will suffer in persecution. You should be getting ready now as a Christian for persecution, because we have got to face the Great Tribulation. If we believe that the end times are upon us, or near, then we need to be ready for the Antichrist. We need to be ready. We need to be looking out for those signs that Jesus taught us to look out for, like these plagues. And when we're looking at this, we think, right, now I'm looking for this. When I see this, I need to be ready for this. Part of this is Great Tribulation. Part of this is the fact that nearly every Christian should expect to die. But it's worth it, because a reward is waiting for you. It's worth it. It's better to die and suffer as a Christian, as a believer, because you've got a future and a hope, rather than avoid the tribulation, avoid the persecution, avoid the troubles, avoid the suffering. Keep your life, because when God comes back, you'll be one of those who is taken away. You don't want to be taken away. You want to be left behind, because you do not want to be judged. You do not want to be condemned. It'll be worth it. It's better to die now as a Christian, because you will have Jesus as your personal shepherd, and he will lead you to fountains of waters and wipe every tear from your eyes. I wanted you to remember that, because this is the context, and this is really what the book of Revelation is about. This is why it's so important to get your doctrines correct and learn when the rapture is, because if you think you're going to be raptured before, you're not going to prepare yourself for persecution, because you think you're going somewhere nice while all this goes on, and you don't think this applies to you. But actually, it all applies to you. I once heard a teacher saying, if we're going to go through the tribulation, why are there no chapters or no books written to help us through that time? And I challenged him on that. He said, oh yeah, but Matthew 24 is for the Jews, and Revelation will be raptured, we won't be there. I said, well, you've just actually put yourself in a circular argument, because you said, why hasn't he written these books? Well, he has. The book was addressed to the church. The book was addressed to Christians. It's written for us. Read the book of Revelation, and chapter 24, of course, is not for Jews, it's for believers. When you are hated for my name's sake, you'll be put out it's when you is addressed to the disciples, it's addressed to believers, and so is this. I want you to take heart. Don't be scared of persecution, because it's worth it, because you need to keep your eyes on Jesus. If you look at your circumstances, of course you'll lose heart, but keep your eyes on Jesus. He will shepherd you and lead you to fountains of waters.